Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I don't know what got me thinking about this, but it was a couple of weeks ago I was sharing with somebody. They said something and it brought back to memory this show that came out in 2003. It was a reality show. It was called The Newlyweds with Nick Lachey and Jessica Simpson. And I wasn't a big fan of it, but, it's one of those things where, you're sitting around. We had young kids, put the kids to bed. My wife wants to watch something. You know what? Okay, you want to watch that show? I'll play on my laptop. But I was just, kind of watching, and at one point Jessica Simpson said, and again, her and Nick were newlyweds, and she said, you know what? Our relationship is so strong, and this marriage is just so great that we really ought to be giving marital advice. That's what we should be doing. And I kind of looked over at my wife. I perked up and looked over at my wife. I'm like, oh my gosh, they have no clue as to what's coming. We were on our second house. Just you have moves, jobs, starting a business, 3 kids. They just had no idea what was coming, and they truly didn't, because in 2006 they divorced, and it was really falling apart much sooner than that. And so relationships are hard. Personal relationships are hard. Business relationships are hard. Relationships with your vendors, with your employees, it's hard. None of it's easy, and we think it's easy, but once we start getting into the heat of things, they become difficult for lots of reasons. And that's what we're going to touch on today. I've got a guest, Matthew Hoffman. He's a national speaker. He's a relationship coach, trainer, and author, and he does a lot with relationships. He's the guy we got on here to talk to us about relationships and the skills we need. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Frank.
So what do you think of Jessica Simpson? You try not to, right?
Well, I have a quick funny story, and I won't go too long on it. We had the opportunity to go to the inauguration for President Bush.
Okay.
And we were in the main train station there in Washington at this black tie dinner. And there was a table behind us, and people were crowded and asking for signatures. And I look over and I don't recognize anybody at the table. And so we're all saying to each other, what's the big deal? Who's the star? And a woman goes, well, I have a teenage daughter. That's Jessica Simpson, and that's her husband, Nick Lachey. And I said, who are they? Right? So we had a run-in with them, and they were young in love, I think. And so I didn't know much about them, but golly, relationships are tough, Frank. You are right.
Well, and that's what keeps you in business. I mean, it's
that's true, but they're worthwhile. The bottom line is they're worthwhile when you do them right. I mean, people do, in whether it's business, relationships, drive and win the day, or it's your personal life with your spouse, your kids, your siblings, your parents, right? I mean, if you don't do relationships right, then your life can be pretty miserable.
Well, we have to have relationships. We do nothing alone, right? I mean, you can't have a business without other people. You can't have a happy life without other people, whether you decide to get married or just be playing the field. I think people who don't have relationships live a very lonely existence in the end. So
we were built for connection, that's for sure.
Yeah. How'd you get into this? How'd you get into the whole relationship thing?
It's interesting. It all started, my wife and I started a podcast in preparation for my book. And the podcast is Kick-Ass Couples Podcast. Over 138 episodes. And we would talk to couples and therapists and people who were experts, pastors, and talk about what it was to be successful in a relationship, and began to build the platform. And that led into launching my first book, which is Kick-Ass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex, which is kind of a handbook for men and women of the things that they need to do in a relationship to excel and do it well.
but my understanding is you really cross over into the business realm as well. I mean,
I do. I speak. I was just in a company in Tampa, Florida last week and training them how to build the best relationships. A lot of companies have values and say, these are our values, but they don't talk about what do we do to demonstrate those on a daily basis. So I really help businesses either through my keynotes or through training, get them into paper about what kind of daily demonstrable actions they have to be making to be living their values and creating a successful, repeatable business.
Well, what parallels do you see between personal and professional relationships?
I think it's huge. I think you're the same person, and hopefully if you have consistency. I'm the same person in my personal life as I am in my business life, and I think it's really, if I'm talking about someone from working with an executive and coaching, if they want to do really well in their business, we start with their personal relationships, because if they're not solid and straight and giving them life, they should be informing and spilling over and motivating the goodness in the business. So you can't have mastery in business if you don't have mastery over self. So we always start on the personal relationship side, whether it's a business or a relationship situation, personal coaching. And then there's a lot of commonality. I mean, the three fundamental principles, I believe, in any relationship start with commitment. That's the cornerstone, right? You get that correct. And then you talk about communication, and communication is kind of that crazy glue that keeps the relationship stuck together and moving forward. And then conflict resolution is the third, because there's going to be conflict or missed expectations or mess ups in every relationship. It's not if they occur, they're going to. So the question is, well, how do we deal with them when they do? So they don't have relationship ending power, but they are turned into instead an invitation to connect and figure out. So when I tell a couple, I say, you have a conflict, it's your partner saying, we got to talk. We need to get on the same page, or at least find understanding. And it doesn't mean you have to agree, but you do have to understand and respect your partner or the other person's position.
And I want to delve into each of those three: commitment, communication, conflict resolution. Do you see those as kind of operating linearly? I don't know if I could say that word. Okay, you've got commitment, now you move on to communication and then conflict resolution, or are they more kind of cyclical and just constantly flowing, and you're kind of constantly having to demonstrate one to the next? Or
I think they're all connected, but what's interesting, if you see a problem or an issue emerge in one of them, it's usually related to the other two. And if you have a conflict, you're not a conflict for conflict's sake. It's either because there was miscommunication or there's a problem with commitment to an idea. One person thinks one thing and somebody thinks something else. So I would say they're interrelated, and they kind of weave back and forth. And the other two are almost always helpful in working through an issue that seems to be only one.
Well, let's take those one by one. Commitment. Quick definition of commitment. Maybe some examples of what you see as commitment, whether personal, professional, or maybe what's not.
Sure. Well, in a personal relationship, I see commitment is like one person saying to another one, my wife and I, this is our journey for life, come what may. You know what? We're not. Separation, divorce, the D word is never an option. So we're committed to figuring this out. So once you have strong commitment in a personal or a business relationship, think of it like a trapeze net for a high wire trapeze, right? If they're up there doing some crazy tricks, if they have a net under them, they're going to try and fail, and the results are not life ending. If there's no net, they don't try. They're going to be very basic and safe, because they know they don't want to do something that's going to kill the relationship. And it's the same in a personal relationship. My wife and I know that we're committed to each other. I make mistakes. She makes mistakes. We give each other a lot of grace, and we know we're not going to say, I'm done, I'm out of here, because somebody makes a mistake. There are certainly some boundaries. We know there's no adultery, there's no cheating. We're not going to lay hands on each other, right? I mean, so there are some fundamental things that you got to get agreement on. And in a business relationship, commitment means I'm going to be dedicated myself with my skills, my talent, my team, my ability to make you successful in what you need to do to demonstrate success in your business. I'm committed to that. And as long as it's not compromising my values, my system, my principles, my beliefs, I'm going to get myself out of the way and give you what you need. And there's a difference, as you know, Frank, between need and want, right? In a relationship, it's not about me to wait on my wife hand and foot and be a doormat and have just do everything she wants, but it is my job to do what she needs. And sometimes that could be, the other day I said, hey, I don't know, I think you got a little blind spot here. Would you mind if I shared something with you just so that you have awareness? And she said, of course. And I shared, and she said, wow, I can see where you're coming from. And thanks for bringing it to my attention. Now, I did it in a loving, respectful manner. I didn't crucify her or break her down in doing it. And it's the same thing in business. Some people have coaches because they don't have the visibility to understand their own blind spots, or what maybe they're too deep in it, or they're drinking their own Kool-Aid. They have a hard time seeing what could be different.
Well, I think that's the nature of blind spots, is none of us can really see them. Some don't acknowledge they're there. Some know they're there and don't want to know what they are. Others know they're there and kind of know what they are and don't want to deal with it. And others want to deal with it, but they don't really want to pay anybody. They want to do it on their own, kind of DIY, and then others will seek out somebody like you to kind of help them through those things. When it comes to commitment, I mean, I get the lifelong marital relationship. I'm coming up on 30 years. And in business, it's different because it's not a lifelong, better for worse, sickness and health. It's, I think back to the people I knew early on, did business with early on. They're not the same. They kind of cycle in and out.
Sure. Well, and I think the key thing in the business commitment side is to let the people that you're working with know what you're committed to, and then ask them, what does commitment look like to you? For you to feel that I'm unequivocally committed and doing what I need to be doing to make you most successful, what does that look like? And they'll tell you. Or what do you need from me to show my commitment? I need you to call me every day, give me a weekly summary report, show me whatever it may be. But it's usually having the conversations that need to happen that usually don't, because we make assumptions, or in absence of communication, we write our own story, and that story is often not reflective of what's going on in the relationship.
Well, that dovetails. That's a good segue into communication. You just said something I really want to kind of pick at or delve into. We write our own story. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think that, people do things and they end up in a spot and they say, how did we get here? Like one of the biggest lies I think that's told in relationships, we just fell out of love. That drives me nuts, because there's no such thing. I mean, the old expression is, you made your bed, now you got to lie in it, right? I mean, we create our own reality in relationships. And, I try to over deliver and under promise. And because I want to make sure that I'm showing up and doing what people need. And if I haven't had that communication, like you talked about, then I'm leaving it to random and chance. Because if I don't know what good looks like, or what you need, or what my focus should be, I'll focus on what I want to focus on, or what I think is important. And getting those boundaries about, hey, this is acceptable and this isn't, or this is what I need you to be doing and not that, right? It's kind of like contracting and understanding, tell me how you're going to measure me and I'll tell you how I can perform, right? And I think a lot of people fail in business and personal relationships to communicate their needs, because they feel, what are they going to think of me if I say that? Or I don't want to be perceived as needy, or, but it's really about, and it took my wife and I 20 years to figure out some of the conversations we needed to have and that we weren't. One of them was along intimacy, right? What do we like? What don't we like? What do we really enjoy? What do we want more of? What do we want a lot less of? Right. And it's those vulnerable conversations that create the bond, that tighten the connection, that bring you closer together. So intimacy, there's 8 different kinds of intimacy, right? And, physical is one of them in a personal relationship, and it's no different in business. There's intellectual, right? Hey, we're learning together, so we're growing together. We're experiencing the same thing together. We're growing together. We're sharing faith together. We're growing together, right? We're emotionally deep and vulnerable with each other. Like, this is what's on my heart and how I'm really feeling. That's growth. So there's all kinds of ways to grow in relationships in our communication when we're vulnerable and willing to say what we're good at or what we fail at or what we struggle with, or even just saying, this is what I need to feel heard.
Getting back to, we fill in our own stories. What I was taking from that, or I thought where you were going to go, is absent communication, we fill in the blanks. So if I don't know what on your mind, I'm going to fill in the blanks of whatever it might be.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. We write the story. If we're not given the information, we still got to draw a conclusion. And that's not always in verbal communication, Frank. That's in physical cues, right? How are they holding themselves? How are they dressed? Is there a smile on their face? Are they frowning?
Yeah.
We get cues and information in relationships, or the fact that they did something to somebody else. Wow. If they did that with that person, that must mean, right? Here comes that conclusion. That must mean that they want to always get what's best for them. And that could be a totally false conclusion. But when I make it and start acting on it, it's as if they did it. And I think in business, that's a huge danger, because people make assumptive closes, or they said and did this, so this must be their angle. They're in it for them. They're not in it for us or for the win. So, those are some dangerous waters for sure.
Yeah, I saw that firsthand just last week. Somebody was telling me that employee came in late and they were just kind of standoffish, and the person figured out I had done something to them, and it turns out they were just having problems at home, which is not anything to be dismissed of, but it's like, okay, you're writing this story that, hey, you've done something, maybe the person's getting ready to leave, resign, or something like that. No, it was none of that. It was, didn't take out the trash or whatever it is, but totally unrelated to the person who was worried about the vibe they were getting, if you will.
Sure.
All right, conflict resolution.
Yeah, it's there's going to be conflict, and I think that what's most important about that is that we reframe what we think it is. It's not, I tell everybody, business and personal, I'll say, it's not, hey, get your dukes up, we're going to fight, right? It's not a preamble to war. It's, hey, we need to talk. Someone came to you and goes, we need to talk. Really? What do we need to talk about? Well, okay, you have a conversation and you're finding understanding. And I think you're always trying to find the dream. You're trying to find the reality within the dream, like the dream within the conflict. Like, there's a conflict and it seems like something is at odds with each other, but what's the dream behind it? Like, what's the thinking that's getting somebody to see there's conflict? What's the cause? It's not necessarily what's on the surface. Great example. I could be having a conflict with somebody in business. They're being bullheaded. They don't want to listen to what I have to say, and they keep cutting me off. Could have nothing to do with me in the relationship, but that person had a huge blow up with their partner in the morning. They stormed out of the house and they left fuming. And I was the first person they saw when they showed up at work. And here they are, unreasonable, angry, untenable, disrespectful, right? And if I react from that, but if I just said, wow, Frank, man, you really don't seem like yourself today. What's going on? Yeah. What's under the surface that's causing you to feel this way? Or why are you so agitated today? Oh, well, Matt, no, it's not you. My partner and I, when I left the house, we had a huge, right? Or my kid was supposed to do this and they did that and they got kicked out of school. You never know. Zig Ziglar used to say, you never know who's kicking somebody else's cat, meaning it could have nothing to do with you. And you just really got to be Sherlock and get in there and ask questions and keep going deeper. Why? What is it that, one of my favorite questions to ask when there's disagreement is what would be the best outcome of this for you? If you could write what exactly like what you'd want to have happen here, what would that look like? And what am I doing? I'm not saying I'm going to do that. If I can, I will, but it's going to help me understand where they want to be. And then I can say, gosh, how can I be an agent of achieving that result? Or how can I contribute? How can I help? And if I don't understand, I can say, can you help me understand why you want to end up there? And you just keep going deeper, because usually the prima facie evidence, what's on the surface, is not indicative of what's causing the conflict.
Yeah. And I can see, reflecting back on things you said earlier, how these are interconnected. Okay, we have a conflict. What's our commitment to each other? Let's dust that off if it needs to be dusted off, because, okay, let's communicate around this. Whatever it might be, letting the kids do a sleepover, well, wait a minute here. We've kind of agreed before that, it wasn't going to happen until they were 12. I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing things out there, but they're all kind of intertwined, if you will. I want to shift gears here a little bit. I want to talk about your business, people listening, how they can help you, how they can refer you, reach out to you, types of work you do. Please.
Yeah, sure. I love to work with people in relationships. I work with men and women, and I work with couples. Probably work with a lot more men who really want to get their relationship back to how it was when they first got married, or they've departed, or there's distrust, or there may have been infidelity. I just got off a call with someone just a few minutes ago who was they've been married 2 years, second marriage for both of them. And the wife said, I'm done. I don't want to be in this anymore. And he's like, oh, what do you mean you're done? And so I like to help people. I've been blessed to be in a great relationship. It's been a lot of work, but my belief is that people are capable and deserving. And if I can help them kind of find that nirvana and get back to that spot, I love that. And I also love on the business side, I do some keynotes. I speak to conferences and people and talk about communication and relationship to give them the ideas and to give them some inspiration, but definitive tactics of things they can do. And I really love training and working with companies that want to affect change in the way they develop relationships and the way they communicate that will make them more successful, more profitable, and more sustainable as companies.
Best way to get a hold of you is through your website, MatthewPHoffman.com, correct?
MatthewPHoffman.com. Yeah, you can learn all about all the things I do, and a lot of free resources there, different ways to connect with me, and that tells most of my story.
Well, I really appreciate it. Matthew Hoffman, author of Kick-Ass Husband. I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Frank.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.